The Ron Arquette Show right here on Talk Radio, 105.7 FM, 570 AM. Great to have you along as you try and get your way home. Make your way home, we should say, on this Monday. Right now, downtown temperature at 51 degrees with Talk Radio, 105.7 FM, 570 AM. Over the weekend, the State Republican Party Central Committee, I think that's the title of it, began a discussion about the state's current convention or caucus convention nominating system. There has been a debate in this state for quite some time to try and change it and to make some changes to it. There are many here in the state who feel that there is no need to change it, including myself. There are some who feel it's antiquated. It does not, it allows a small group of very active people to take over the caucus and convention system. And there's been some debate as to possibly some within the party establishment are pushing for changes, and if changes aren't made, may in fact try and get a petition drive together to change the system completely. And they talked about this over the weekend here in Salt Lake City. And the party chairman, Thomas Wright, is looking for, I would think it's fair to say, a compromise, at least to make some changes to satisfy those who are pushing for the petition drive. Well, one who is behind that petition drive effort is a former party secretary for the Utah County Republican Party. We've had him on the show before, and we want to welcome back to our newsmaker line tonight. That is Jeremy Roberts. Jeremy, how are you, and welcome back to the show.
Good, Rod. Thanks for having me on.
Have I got that about right, Jeremy, and kind of laying out the case that is being discussed?
Kind of. I think the difference is that I think a lot of people within the Republican Party are operating under, I guess, a different assumption than I am. A lot of them believe that the caucus system is theirs, and so it's for them to make changes to it. And I would argue that the caucus system belongs to the people of Utah and is theirs to make changes to. So I think that's where a little bit of the disconnect is.
All right. Let me ask you, who's behind this effort, Jeremy? I mean, I know you're pushing for the changes, but who else is behind all of this?
Well, it's kind of interesting. When I originally decided that I wanted to look at this, and I've looked at maybe making changes to or at least approaching making changes to the system for, 5 or 6 years. This year I finally just said, you know what, I'm going to see if we can go ahead and just do it. So I called LeVar Webb, who I had known for quite some time, and I knew that he had been involved with a group that had wanted to change it. And I asked if they were moving forward, and LeVar said, I don't think so, Jeremy, not this year. And I said, great. So I'll kind of pick up the mantle and run with it. And so I did that. And since I've kind of, come forward and say I'm going to be looking at doing this, the volume of people that are just from every kind of background you can imagine that have come forward and said, hey, we want to be in on this.
Yeah, but
it's been kind of overwhelming. So originally it was kind of me by myself, and now I think it's kind of a broad-based coalition of people from all across the state.
Yeah, but it's true, isn't it, Jeremy, that former Governor Mike Leavitt is behind this, Kurt Jowers is behind this, LeVar Webb is behind this. I've heard names like Fred Lampropoulos. I've heard names like Stan and Becky Lockhart, all behind this effort to change. Is that fair to say?
Well, I don't think Stan and Becky Lockhart are. I know Stan Lockhart is probably the strongest defender and apologist for the current system that you'll find. So I think that would probably be a mistake to suggest that he is. I haven't heard Fred Lampropoulos. I've never spoken to Mike Leavitt about this. And I had actually one conversation in my entire life with Kurt Jowers, and that was after I told everyone that I was going to make the change. And he said, wait, can I be involved? And I said, well, yeah, I thought you weren't doing anything. So, well, I'm sure that some of those people have been involved, not with me.
Okay. Now,
I've personally not done that. Dave Hansen, who had been involved with quite a few different races, I know that he's certainly looking at being involved. And so there are quite a few people. I don't think that I think some people are suggesting that it's kind of the, Mike Leavitt, Kurt Jowers crowd. And granted, they've definitely been spearheading a lot of this. But I think that that's probably a narrow view of looking at who's all involved.
All right, so you don't say they're behind it. They're part of the discussion, but they aren't the driving force. Is that fair to say in your opinion?
I don't think so. I know that they're making, they're certainly reaching out to Thomas Wright. I know that they're meeting with him this week. And I know that they've, been trying very hard to make sure that they work with him on that. I think that leaves out, Jim DeBackus and the Democrats who are, there are quite a few Democrats who have been involved in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, unfortunately, people have focused too much on, this being a Republican problem. And first off, I don't know if it's necessarily a problem. And second off, I don't think this is necessarily limited to one party.
Well, if it's not a problem, then why change it, Jeremy?
Well, so here's the interesting question is, we got our caucus system in 1896 when we became a state. I mean, that's only, 26 years or so after we decided to allow people to vote who were maybe not Caucasian. And it predates women voting by 24 years. And the only time we took a break from having it is when the state legislature, in I think 37, decided we were going to have just an open primary. And then they went back in 47 and said, wait, let's bring it back and have the caucus convention again. And at the time, the threshold we had to avoid a primary was at 80%. And that's been, 66 years ago, something like that if my math's right. So it's been a good 66 years since we really had a really involved policy discussion about the system. And for me, I think that there are certainly some benefits to it. I think I've mentioned this before. I've never been involved in a race that didn't win. I'm not upset about inherently Bob Bennett losing. I voted for Mike Lee. I, wasn't an Olin Walker person. I mean, she's nice and all, but, I voted Marty Stevens first and then Fred Lampropoulos second. So I'm not sour grapes about the current system. I just think that while the system's good, I think we could probably make some changes to it to improve it. And I don't think that's something that we should necessarily fear.
All right, Jeremy, I've got a few more questions. Do you mind holding through a break here? I'd like to come back and ask you a few more questions. All right? All right, we're speaking with Jeremy Roberts. He is one of the individuals behind this push to change the nominating process here in the state of Utah for political candidates. More coming up. Hear about it, talk about it on Talk Radio 105.7 FM, 570 AM. It is a discussion here in the state of Utah that, in my opinion, seems to have almost 9 lives, something that simply will not go away. We're talking about changing the state's current caucus convention nominating system when it comes to selecting candidates for either political party or any of the political parties here in the state of Utah. State Republicans gathered, the Central Committee gathered over the weekend to talk about this. There is talk about a possible initiative drive to change the system more to a primary system than a caucus convention system. And a lot of people feel, maybe it's a case of sour grapes out there. Joining us again on our Newsmaker line is Jeremy Roberts. Jeremy is a former secretary with the Utah County Republican Party to talk about this. He's one of those driving the changes here. Jeremy, let me ask you again on all of this. Is it sour grapes? Because as I look at this, there were a lot of people who were upset back in when Bob Bennett lost at convention and Mike Lee now serving there. And there was a general feeling, look, we cannot allow a small group of people, and they were referring to people with the Tea Party, to organize and take over the convention. And they wanted to change it then. But look what happened last year. Orrin Hatch got organized, he got people to the caucus, and he won re-election. So why change this?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. First off, the delegates didn't pick Mike Lee. Now, granted, I did. I was on the losing side somewhat on that. The delegates picked Tim Bridgewater. Mike Lee barely made it to a primary. I think there are a couple of reasons to change it. But first off, in terms of the sour grapes thing, I don't know of anybody who's talked to me that's had a sour grape about anything. I mean, you look at Olin Walker. Olin Walker didn't lose because of the caucus and convention. Olin Walker lost because she waited so long to say that she was officially going to run for the governor's race. And by then, John Huntsman was in there, Fred Lampropoulos, Parley Hellewell, and Marty Stevens. I mean, you had Nolan Karras, you had all those people. I mean, Gary Herbert was in that crowd before he decided to run as running mate for John Huntsman. So I don't think that you can blame that loss on the caucus convention. I think it would probably be naive to do so. So I don't know why anyone would be sour about anything. And in terms of me personally, I'm an advocate for the system. I think in most cases it works pretty well. And I think there's a mischaracterization. The idea is not to get rid of the caucus and convention. Look, you can look at states like Louisiana. Louisiana has a system where everyone kind of puts their name into a hat, and the top 2 vote getters from a primary end up being in the general election. Okay? Well, I would reject that out of hand as probably a really bad idea. The idea that I've looked at, and I think some other people have looked at, is more like what Connecticut has. Connecticut has a caucus convention somewhat similar to Utah, but they have an alternative where somebody can seek a nomination by the rank and file members of a political party, and when you go into a primary that way, on the ballot it says, hey, look, this is who the party picked The convention said, this is our person. But this other guy wants to run too. And it is incredibly infrequent, actually, that the challenger, to the caucus person wins, but still, it's an option. But I think there are a few problems with it. Let me give you an example of it. So an LDS missionary who can still vote in the state of Utah can't attend a caucus. We've now said that he has less power to pick candidates for office. Somebody's a fireman or a police officer, they can't inherently make the caucus or convention. Somebody's a physician, somebody's a single mother. So we've got one night every 2 years that you have to show up for, and we have 3,500 state delegates in the Republican Party, and it's like 2,800 or something like that in the Democratic Party who get elected. So we've got about, let's be generous and say 6,000 people. We had 6,000 people taking who's on the ballot. That's a really lot of power concentrated in very few amount of people.
Yeah, but let me ask you. Let me go back to that point, Jeremy. In my opinion, the current system is a very grassroots effort. You have got to work your tail off. You've got to get people to get there. In this, the system that you're talking about, let's say a candidate can't get through the convention. Let's say in the case using a Bob Bennett, okay? Bob Bennett has the money and the power to beat an individual who may not have that. So, to protect the grassroots effort. I mean, the system you're suggesting, does it really work? Doesn't it say, well, the convention really doesn't matter. It's the guy with the money who can get out in front of the low-information voter with a 5-second soundbite and convince everybody he should be elected?
Well, I think it's probably a mistake to say that somebody who's not a delegate is by default a low-information voter. I think the other thing...
No, I'm not talking about the delegate. I'm talking about voters in general.
I know. And I think that I think some people have made the claim that delegates are high-information voters, whereas the rank and file of a party are low information. I don't think that's probably good rhetoric to support keeping the current system, because I don't think people will respond well to it. But look at it this way. If what you're saying is true, then grassroots politics should be nearly impossible to do in any other state besides Utah. That's certainly not the case. The other problem is that Utah should have the least expensive campaigns if you look at dollar per vote received in the nation. We don't. Let's look in terms of power and money and name. Look at Daniel Thatcher, who, by the way, strongly supports the current system. But Daniel Thatcher ran an entire Senate race in the state of Utah on $9,000. He ran against Brent Goodfellow, who'd been in office for decades, and had almost $120,000 in his campaign account. He won. So I think that it would be a mistake to characterize that if we make any change, all of a sudden the ability for a low income or an inexpensive campaign to win, I think that'd probably not be right. For example, Jason Chaffetz won the well, let me rephrase that. He won a convention and then ended up winning the nomination in a primary. But his first race, just to get out of the convention, he spent $70,000. That same year in Cleveland, a woman won a congressional seat spending $98,000 for the whole thing. So is it necessarily cheaper to run in Utah?
Yeah, okay, real quick. One final question. We've only got about 45 seconds. I'll ask it quickly. LeVar Webb told me late last year that they weren't going to pursue this petition drive. Now there's talk they may try it. They may try it again. Why now? What's the change from last fall to this now to this spring? And you've got about 30 seconds.
Well, I don't know. I can't speak for LeVar. I can tell you for me, I've wanted to do it for a long time, and I kind of was waiting for other people to kind of pick it up and say run with it. And I finally just decided, I've waited long enough, and so I decided to move forward with it. And I think it's a timely discussion. We haven't had a serious, I know you said that, this is the thing like 9 lives. I don't know if it's ever had one life. We haven't had a really serious policy discussion on the delegate system for 66 years. All right,
Jeremy.
And I think it's time to finally have it.
All right, Jeremy, thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate you staying over for a second segment.